The first thing setting Columbus apart from other European explorers of the 1490s was the direction in which he wanted to travel to India and China. He hypothesized that sailing west into the open ocean would lead to the other side of the world. This hadn't been done before, of course. But why? There were three main reasons. The first reason was that up until the 15th century, ships built by and available to Europeans couldn't really be counted on to withstand the storms and the battering of the open ocean. Boats were small and relied on oars for propulsion. Europeans sailed along coasts within the sight of land pretty much all the time, unless they were completely lost at sea. The second issue, interestingly enough, was a fear of sea monsters. Europeans believed the open ocean was home to enormous sea monsters. Some had seen what we now know as whales and walruses from land, and Europeans also read tales of sailors who never came back after being possibly swallowed up by such monsters or the waters themselves. And there's also the story of Jonah and the whale in the Bible, and Europeans at that time knew about that. The third issue was the issue of crude maps. Between the fall of the Roman Empire 1,000 years earlier and Columbus's century, ancient Greek and Roman scientific information had been largely lost to Europeans because of war and religious closure against pagan knowledge. Early 1400s Europeans were behind their ancient counterparts in both geographical and astronomical knowledge, and in science in general, actually. All this changed in the 1400s. By Columbus's time, the Portuguese had improved ships so they were sturdy, seaworthy, and pretty fast in deep water. These new ships were called caravels, and they had several sails that could be adjusted as required by the wind, as well as efficient stern-mounted rudders. And those were big changes. Improved ships, along with the greater availability of a reliable magnetic compass, which had been which were newly made now in the Europe of the 1400s, sailors would not have to get completely lost or become completely lost out at sea because they could always find the true magnetic north. What about the sea monsters? Columbus was certainly aware of them. It is, it is possible he believed God would protect him. He was a religious man after all, or that he would be able to maneuver out of their way as necessary. We have no evidence of his thinking on this matter, but apparently he ultimately discounted sea monsters as true blocks to an alternate route to India or China. In any case, 44 years before Columbus was born, a very important geography book was translated from ancient Greek into Latin, the language of the educated Europeans. The ancient Greek mathematician Ptolemy's book, Geographia, created a sensation in Italy, Portugal, and Spain when it was translated into Latin, and it challenged the very basis of medieval map making. Up until then, map makers had based the proportions of countries on their maps, not on mathematical calculations, but on the importance of different places. The more important a country was, for example, the bigger it appeared on the map. Well, Ptolemy's introduction of mathematics and the idea of accurate measurement were to change the nature of European map making forever. And thus Columbus had access to more accurate maps of the world, even though none of them, of course, included the New World. But he did have access to them, and sailors before him may have not. Even with all these technological advances, Columbus still had to have the audacity to believe sailing into the open ocean, and returning himself and his crew to to Europe whole and alive was possible. And he had to sell it to the Catholic monarchs. Not so much for funding, actually. They actually required him to raise his own funding, but more for moral and political validation, which is something that Columbus prized. Today, as you all know, Columbus is a blighted historical figure. Less and less people across the Americas and Europe and Africa care to celebrate the man who connected 4 continents. All the pillaging and enslavement of both the indigenous and so many Africans that ensued after his discovery is hard to discount. He cannot easily be exonerated, nor should he be. Having said that, we can certainly say this of Christopher Columbus: the man had chutzpah.